Hi there. Hello, everyone can hear me? Excellent. Thank you so much for having me join today's session. I'm disappointed that I couldn't be there with you all, but really thrilled that we could make this work. So thank you so much to WorldDAB. So the brief really was to talk about the progress that we have made since the session I gave last year in Madrid. So this is going to be a pretty honest assessment of how we've performed against our roadmap. So I'm Lizzie Young, the CEO of CRA here in Australia, which is the industry body. And we represent all of the major networks here in Australia. And it's a great privilege to share where we're at down under with you. 12 months on, how is the landscape? How have we really performed against the roadmap that we set out? And WorldDAB asked me to kind of contemplate three sort of different questions. What has our experience been over the last 12 months? What's it taught us about what works and what doesn't when trying to secure broadcast radio prominence across government, technology platforms and automotive manufacturers? Question two was sort of, as EV adoption accelerates and new infotainment systems arrive without broad prominence built in, how does the industry act before the inflection point rather than after it? And sort of the question of, can broadcast radio access be repositioned from a commercial preference to a safety and resilience requirement? And what would that mean for the regulatory and engineering pathways available to us? So hopefully I'm going to answer some of those questions as I go through and provide an update on what is our 5-point roadmap. This is the slide that I presented last year, and you can see the 5 things that we had in our roadmap, which I'll come on to in a minute. I thought just briefly to kick off, I would just make mention of the landscape. And really what has happened over the last 12 months here in Australia is that 4 things have stayed the same, but 1 thing has very much changed. So what has stayed the same? And I know you've seen some data this morning. Is data from Infinite Dial, which we do in Australia, but effectively what we know, and it's consistent with what you saw this morning out of the new data, is that Australians rely on radio in the car, and it is incredibly important for them because it is the method of audio consumption that they want the most. And interestingly, though, for us in Australia, it is very important that we take a hybrid approach. So for us, we must have access to the radio that includes AM and FM receivers, DAB receivers, and streaming radio in the car. And we really must deliver that because we have quite a unique set of challenges here in Australia. And the number one thing is our geographic landscape. So what you see on this animated chart is the coverage of AM, FM, DAB+, and IP radio. And so for us, because we are such a vast nation, we really need to ensure that we have receivers remaining in the car as well as IP protocol. It is critical to us as a nation because of our size and scale and the geographics that we have. The second thing or the other point about the landscape that has not changed and in fact continues to remain, an imperative for us is our climate conditions. We are at the behest of floods and fires every summer, and it is critical because of that and the fact that many Australians move away from these climate disasters in their vehicles, that we have robust emergency broadcasting capabilities in the car. And that is why we must also have AM, FM, DAB and IP. So there is a unique set of circumstances in Australia here from an audience perspective consumers need in their vehicle. and that remains, of critical importance to us. The other factor for us, and I spoke to this last year, is of course that we are a long way from all of the automotive manufacturing in the world. And I know there are some auto manufacturers in the audience today. And I guess really, our message here is that we are a long way from manufacturing and product decisions. We have a set of circumstances in Australia that are pretty unique. And we really are focused as an industry on ensuring that the cars that come into this country answer the needs of Australian consumers and what they need, which is why we are so focused on our prominence strategy. As I said, there is one thing that has changed, and that is Australia's electric vehicle market has reached record highs. And there's actually new data available as of last week, which is not on these charts, but I will share with you now, which is to say, for the first month ever in May, an electric vehicle was the number one selling car in Australia. That is the first time that has happened. And it really is signalling a changing of the guard. And effectively what you can see on these charts here is very recent data about the surge in EV penetration. It is being driven by fuel costs here in Australia, which have skyrocketed as a result of the geopolitical conditions and the war. And really what we're seeing is an incredible uptake of connected devices. So much so that this boat built and owned by BYD arrived on our shores last week, and it deposited 5,000 cars in Sydney and Melbourne, our two major metro markets. And there is talk that those 5,000 cars are pretty much already sold. So the thing for us that has really escalated very quickly is the EV penetration in this country. So to the roadmap, this was what I shared last year, and I was now just going to give a summary of where we're at with each of these points from a performance perspective, what has worked for us. So at this time last year, we were in the middle of rebuilding our single industry app, radio app, which we have now done and launched thanks to our partners with Xperi. And that has been very successful. The second thing that we are doing, or the second step to this that we are about to launch, is driving audience growth of our app. Now, the reason we have done this is to demonstrate to the government in Australia that this is not purely a regulatory solve. We as an industry are investing in what consumers need, and we are coming up with a single solution for the entire country. I'd also just note that whilst I represent the commercial broadcasters, we do also have our public broadcasters as part of our single radio app for the industry. So we really have built something that can be a single point of access that we are very excited about, and we are investing in that to make it easy for consumers to access the car in the radio, so long as it has prominent positioning. The second thing in our roadmap was really around strategic partnerships and integration. And we have really spent the last year ensuring that we are everywhere that consumers can discover us in cars, and working on relationships that, to be honest, have not even launched in Australia yet. But we are focused on ensuring that when they do, that we are partnering with them. And so that has, we have been long-standing partners of DTS AutoStage, but Radio Player, I know that they're in the room. So that will also be a partnership that we have. And we've also been working with Vistion and Access Twine for car. And we've also been working through ensuring that our metadata is in good order. And I know that was something certainly that was spoken about by one of the earlier sessions. And so we've been doing work on enabling radio DNS. So really what we've been doing there is about discoverability and making sure we are everywhere that consumers need us to be and showing up in the right way. The third part of our roadmap was around industry collaboration. And for us, that was that piece that I mentioned around the sort of leveraging partnerships with the public broadcasters, so that we really are talking about the entire industry. It's also been for us around increasing awareness of this issue, using the industry to do that. And so you can see here a bunch of owned and earned activity that we did on the right last year in the media to raise awareness of the issue. And I note that earlier there was talk around the Connected Journeys campaign that ran across World Radio Day. We will look to do something of that nature and, collaborate with Radio Ready on that when the time is right for us in Australia. And that will be when legislation is being considered by our government, which we are hopeful is in the very near future. Which brings me on to sort of the fourth part for us, which was really about ensuring we could negotiate a fit for purpose regulatory framework in this area, levelling up against the global platforms, protecting what consumers need and our national sovereignty, because that is what is at risk if the radio is removed from the car. So we've been getting very clear on our ask to government around prominence and the inclusion of receivers in cars. We've also been looking for ways to use emergency broadcasting as a lever. And that was something that WorldDAB asked me about. Given our climate conditions, it's really important. We are looking at whether there are things we can build into our app around emergency alerts that would also make it, very compelling. We've also been spending time with ministers outside of the communications portfolio and really working with ministers that are focused on regional development, regional Australia and other areas around the. And we've also been working with what is called the ANCAP safety standards here in Australia, and they collaborate very closely with their counterparts in Europe to contemplate whether it would be possible for there to be a safety standard around where the radio is positioned in the car. Because what we also don't want is to have drivers distracted trying to find it. So that is something that I'd love to pick up with our European colleagues who might be there today to see if there is a way forward there. And the other thing that we have been doing is building an evidence base to support our asks, because we will have smart speaker legislation for prominence and then we'll need auto to follow that. So we've really been talking about what the evidence is to demonstrate to government what the audience needs and what consumers needs, and also about the very real risk of what will happen if radio is removed from the car. And then the final piece that we were working on last year was really around our direct automotive industry engagement. This is hard for us because of our geographic location. So we've been really focused on making the case for what consumers want. And we've been doing that in three ways. So the first is through the industry body here, the FCAI, and I'm sure there's equivalents around the world, but also the EV Council. And we've also started to show up at industry events. So EV, Everything Electric is actually a global show. They have lots of test drives that happen. Thousands and thousands of people go there when it's on in Sydney. And we're actually working with them this year to ensure that every time that there is a test drive, that radio app will be in the car. And we're doing a whole lot of other activations to really drive awareness up amongst the local auto manufacturing industry and consumers and government that are there. And we have now just kicked off a series of one-on-one meetings with Australian-based teams at the auto manufacturers. This is challenging, as I said, as there's not many in the market, but we are hopeful that we can really make strides on this in the next 6 months. And we have outreach with a product manager from BYD, for example, who is actually based in Australia that we are currently working on. So lots of things that we sort of evolved from that 5-point strategy from last year. If I'm brutally honest on performance, I'm disappointed that we haven't gotten closer to getting prominence legislation through with our government. There have been a number of things that have popped up in Australia that have delayed it. We were told that we would have some legislation to review in March. And that has now been pushed out for some very valid reasons about some very other significant issues that have happened in this country. But notwithstanding that, what is at risk here is Australia's only 100% Australian owned and operated media channel and our national sovereignty. So this is now getting critical, but we are confident that we will have legislation being drafted in the second half of this year. And so really what we are doing now is sort of three things on the roadmap. So we still have our 5-point roadmap, but within that, there are really three things that you will start to see us do in the next kind of quarter, 3 months. We are going to have to start to get very noisy. So the idea of doing a campaign like what was done in Europe around connected journeys is top of our mind, and something that we will start developing. We are really pushing forward with smart speaker legislation because it is the route to then getting auto as a fast follow. And we believe, nearing engagement with our government on that. And the good thing is we do have support for this from all sides of politics. So we are feeling confident that that will happen in the next quarter. And then that engagement with the automotive sector is the other critical thing. So whilst we have a 5-point roadmap and all of those, all of the different 5 stages are important, there are sort of 3 things right now that we are very focused on. And I'm hopeful that by this time next year at the next World DAB Automotive Summit, that we will have some legislation being drafted and underway, that we will have continued to develop fantastic products for consumers in the car, because I think it is really important for us as an industry to participate in this. We are not asking the automotive industry or the government to solve entirely for us. We really see this as a 3-way partnership to do the right thing by consumers and listeners and car buyers, and are really hopeful that we can get some great outcomes within the next year, which would be fantastic for everybody. So I guess I would just close by again saying thank you so much for having me. I hope that it was very quick, but I hope that was a bit of an update on where we are at. And if for anybody in the room, it has sparked some thoughts around partnerships that we could do, ways that we could collaborate, ideas that you might have, or any opportunities to talk with auto manufacturers, etc., then please, I'd willingly love to hear from you and connect and talk about what they might look like. So thank you very much, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.